And you mustn't let that worry. It doesn't mean anything. I told Hilton Edwards and Michael McLearmore that I was a few years older than I was and pretended to have a lot of experience.
Take two.
Take two. Give you a rough idea. I told them I was a famous actor, and matter of fact, I'd never been on the stage except in school, and I honestly don't think I fooled them for a minute, but they were nice enough to pretend they were fooled, and they were desperate enough for actors, so that the two things combined to give me what amounted to a star part. And I made a great smashing, roaring success as an actor. 29 years ago it is, and I've never equaled it since as an actor. I've been looking back on it since. I may have been better as an actor, but I never got such a response. And then as the years went on, or it seemed years, it was only months in Dublin, people said, why don't you do something as good as that? And so I finally slunk away. But it was a wonderful experience. It was a great part. And of course it had the ideal thing for an actor. It was a part. The name of the play was Jew Seuss, played by Hilton Edwards, and then there was this character that wasn't named, the Archduke. They never heard of it, and in came that fella with all those good scenes, and they said, oh, that's the one, you know. People love to find an unknown actor stealing the show, and I got a lot of special applause and credit that I didn't deserve, as one always does. It's like playing Iago in Othello, as Mac will understand, you know. Exactly the same principle. Sir? There's a gentleman who wants to know why I don't stand for or what did I ever think of standing for the presidency of the United States of America. Well, I did think several times of running for the Senate, which is not at all the same thing, but stepping stone. But I really never had dreams of the White House. No, somebody of my sort could never get to be president. First of all, I'm not a very good politician, you know. About 75% of the politician's job takes place off a public platform and consists of jollying up the boys. And I'm awfully poor at that. Mind you, I'm not speaking about my real capacities for the presidency. I'm not saying that... I'm not saying for a minute that I would be a good president. I'm just talking about getting elected. A lot of very curious people get to be presidents and prime ministers, so I don't think it's absolutely absurd to talk about any grown-up person as a candidate, you know, as long as they don't have a hair lip or something. But I never did consider myself as a candidate for the White House, mainly because, as I say, I don't think I have the political skill to head a party. I've had all kinds of wild dreams, from being a tram conductor to being a bullfighter. And I've been a bullfighter of a bad sort. I never was a tram conductor, but the presidency never crossed my mind. I have heard crowds shouting, Wells for vice president. That happened to me once after a political meeting. That's the nearest moment of glory I ever had. It was a big political meeting in Madison Square Garden, and they were shouting, you know, the names of their favorites, just because it was the end of a good speech. But I would have wrecked the whole thing in 2 days, you know, if it had come to that. Yeah.
Do you agree with Clemenceau's remark that the American nation went from barbarism to decadence without any intermediate civilization?
Do I agree with Clemenceau's remark that the American nation went from barbarism to decadence without any intermediate period between? Well, I think the American people were never as barbarous as they pretended to be in their frontier days, since they were mostly younger sons in those barbarous days, or pretty well-educated, dissenting Scots and English and so on. I'm speaking of the real frontier days. And then at the end, what I mean is up to now, I don't think Americans are nearly as decadent as they pretend to be. I think both the barbarism and the decadence are greatly exaggerated. Whether we are a civilized country, of course, is a question which an Irishman must examine his soul before he asks an American. Neither of our countries had the benefit of Roman occupation. We both had the English for a while, you for a little longer. But we both got rid of them, all right? Whether they civilized us or the opposite, I couldn't say. But I don't know. Civilized people are it's very hard. Of course, what does civilization mean? It means city culture, doesn't it? Really, in its roots, people who live in the city. And so, of course, America was never civilized at the beginning because people didn't live in cities. And their most civilized people were patrician country gentlemen of extremely liberal views who made the American Revolution, and frontiersmen, and now we have whatever it is today. I don't know. I don't want to go and defend my country. I think most of American barbarism, I think in many ways America is more barbaric today than it was 150 years ago. I don't think America is decadent. I think there's an aspect of American life which is flabby and self-indulgent and dangerously weak. I think there is a kind of barbarism which has grown up in America recently, but it is the same barbarism which has grown up all over the world. It's just another aspect of it. Those who examine America from the outside may find that it's more intense in America. Maybe I'm weaseling here. Do you think I am? I don't know. Yes, sir. Wait, I've got a man standing up. I'll answer that in a second. Yes, sir. You mean the movie?
Yes, the movie of that play, and you were in it too.
There's a gentleman who's reminding me of the failure of the motion picture Othello. Here's a man who wants to know what I did wrong with Othello to explain the fact.
Take 3.
Excuse me, sir, let me repeat your question. I am asked, first of all, the question has a little preamble to it. A motion picture called Othello, in which one of the leading parts was played by one of the leaders of the Irish stage, Mr. Michael McLeamore, played in Dublin and was, according to this gentleman, a failure in Dublin. And his question is, what did I do wrong? First answer, I suppose, would be to have made Othello at all. But seriously, what I did wrong, I suppose, was to have exhibited it, to allow it to show in Dublin. If you want me to examine my conscience, what's that ghastly noise? If you want me to examine my conscience and tell you what I did wrong with it, all right, but you weaken your question by telling me that it did badly in Dublin, because good things have done badly in Dublin as well as bad. All over the world, good things have done well. I don't think you have to explain what you did wrong because you have a failure. Othello... The gentleman puts it to me that the play, by which you mean the film, sir, is that right? If it had been well, properly staged, would have gone down here. Now, that may be so. I think you've made the point. Ginger Man only lasted 3. I am not pretending to you for a minute, sir, that Othello deserved success, because that wouldn't be for me to say. But by the same token, it wouldn't be for me to say that it deserved failure. An artist who makes a film or puts on a play does his best, and the question of desert, either in the presence of failure or success, does not come into it in a conversation with the artist. I deserve success because I worked my head off, went into debt, serious debt in order to make it, and did my level best. If I did a poor job, I didn't deserve failure. I just had bad luck. Yeah. Right. Sir, I think you've made your point. Yeah. Yes. Just a minute, sir. Excuse me. Have a gentleman here. Commercial entertainments, he's saying. You are in danger, sir, of losing me, my public. I beg your pardon? What? And why wasn't he better? Well, he wasn't better because I directed him badly. Do you know that we are boring everybody? And what's that, Noel? All right. Please. Sir, may we return to you in a moment? Will you excuse us just 1 second? Good. Very good, yes.
Very interesting to know a psychological reason in your country of the enormous success of hot gospel.
That's a very interesting question. The question comes from a gentleman that I recognize, and whose voice you must have recognized, one of the greatest living Shakespearean actors, Mr. Anya McMaster. Who has returned fairly recently from a tour in America of one of the longest-winded of Mr. Eugene O'Neill's plays, in which he made a great success. And during the course of it, I gather that Mr. McMaster stumbled upon a few of our revivalists and hot gospelers and wants to know about that. Well, don't you think, first of all, it comes from the fact that all these dissenting Protestant groups who came from England, Scotland, and the lowlands too, came to America and flourished there. And flourish is certainly the word. And I suppose you're thinking also of these faith healers and all that kind of...
I'm thinking particularly after your very charming first half that a most wonderful play or picture could be written for you on that subject.
On hot gospeling.
Yes, how belief doesn't seem to even be there as long as they have the histrionic gift. What I want to know is, are they sincere, or if they are they managers?
Wonderful question. I've actually worked on a script on an evangelist and came to a kind of dead end with it because I realized that to be as tough as I wanted, I would seem to be attacking all evangelists, because I do believe that some of them are hopeless frauds. but some of them must be sincere. And I realized that the script that I was working on would, if it were successful and effective, persuade an audience that the whole race of hot gospelers, the whole race of evangelists and take the sawdust trail, boys and girls, were a bunch of phonies. And I didn't think that would be fair, because I was sure there were a lot of convinced people. And it is a sort of problem. I'm sure there are terrible fakes among them and some sincere ones. They certainly are demagogues. They may be the demagogues of God, but...
They knowingly or unknowingly have an actor's gift.
Well, I think every preacher has an actor's gift, knowingly, and quite properly. I think it's quite right that a preacher, or a politician, or an advocate, or a man pleading in a court or talking to a congregation, I think that all those people are actors. And being actors does not imply a lack of sincerity. They simply have the gift that the actor has to communicate to a public.
My point, sir, is this. Do you think that even an agnostic could become a famous gospeler because of his theology?
An agnostic certainly could become, yes. But he wouldn't be a method hot gospeler. Now, excuse me, I interrupted you, sir. Here's a... You know, it's a terrible question. I have to repeat it. Commercial standards being what they are, do I imagine somebody of my kind, I don't know, exactly what that means, but does somebody of my kind imagine that they're going to get away with it? Well, it's a question I ask myself every time I go to bed and every time I get up in the morning, It's very hard to, I really don't know how to answer that question properly, because I would have to first admit what I thought I was, and then I would have to say in relation to that what I thought the commercial market was. It's an enormous question. To answer it properly and really honestly would be so autobiographical as to destroy any pretense of conversation. Yes. Well, the very nice and very flattering question. What could... that wasn't applause. That's a technical...
Take four.
That awful thing. I have to stop before I answer your question and explain to you that machine that the man rushed...